let's move on.
All right, moving on to the Steelers. 9-8 last year. Vegas has them at 8.5. They were 24th in passing, 16th in rushing. I think 8.5 is a tall order for them in this division. They didn't do enough at the end of the season to prove that this team is anything that they, in terms of competitive in the division, but they did have a winning record. Save Tomlin, which is huge. I think Kenny Pickett's going to be better. He's ADP 168 overall. He's QB 20. I think that's accurate and where he should be because he finished 28th overall last year. He can improve upon that, but he's not going to make leaps and bounds to get himself in the top 10. He's
the worst
however,
quarterback in this division, and he is going to be the worst quarterback in the division.
But that being said, they're probably going to be – I mean, they have a good defense. Steelers always do, but they're playing from behind at times. But let's just say this. What surprised me about Kenny Pickett, he had 55 rushing attempts last year, 237 yards and 3 touchdowns. The guy ran a lot at Pitt. I expect him to continue to use those legs. It's not obviously going to be like Lamar Jackson, but that being said, 55 attempts is a lot. So that's something to keep an eye on. I'm not looking to draft him. I'm not even looking to stash him. I'm not even looking at him in Dynasty. I haven't seen enough from him to prove it to me. But Najee Harris is somebody who's always had this polarizing thought process on him year after year, and everybody wants to dirt on him, and yet then he finishes still top 12. So he's 27th overall, RB 12. He finished 12 last year, 14 in PPR. That's mostly due to the down turn in the passing game where his targets and his receptions were pretty much almost cut in half. But the biggest number is he only has a 3.82 yards per carry last year. He's never been over 4 in the 2 seasons that he's been here. And that's the part that I don't like about him. That's why it's hard for me to have him inside my top 12 if you're not producing good rushing attempts, rush after rush after rush. I mean, they didn't have a good offensive line last year. He probably was – I got to break down the numbers a little bit more, but if I'm correct, his – yards before contact is pretty low, and his yards after contact is where he made his money, which is a good thing. However, when you're getting hit behind the line of scrimmage, that doesn't help anybody. So
the concerning thing about Najee is that, yeah, he's going to get the volume, and you draft him because he's going to get the volume. But he does not break off big plays. I think of all the starting running backs in the league, he has the lowest 20-plus yard rushes. I think he had under 3 last year of 20-plus yard rushes. That's low. That's low for a guy that's going to touch the ball 400 times. You look at and this is why there's a lot of hype around Jaylen Warren this year, is that they're going to kind of spare Najee a little bit and give Jaylen Warren more volume, and he's shown that he can be productive with the ball. But I kind of said this a month or two ago, we did the offenses that were avoided, and this was one of them. And it's not because they don't have talent. They have a lot of talent on this team. This is one of the more talented offenses. But this is kind of your thoughts on the Baltimore Ravens. It's just a lot of mediocrity across the board. And I don't see a 1,000-yard receiver from this team, even though they have 3 very talented receivers. I don't see a ton of touchdowns. And I know there's been a lot of offseason, the hype train, people are trying to get it around Kenny Pickett. And look how he finished the season. He was efficient. He only threw 5 touchdowns in the last 7 games. He
didn't have a very good end of the season. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's his numbers, he became more efficient because he stopped turning the ball over and he started learning the offense a little better. And I think year 2, he's going to have a little bit more of a veteran mindset coming into the season. And they have the weapons around him. I just don't see this offense. The Steelers offense has always been, I don't care who gets the ball, other than when they had Antonio Brown, that where it's just heavy volume. But even look at the years that Plax was there and Martavis Bryant was there, they just relied on big plays to be able to sustain their fantasy numbers. So that being said, maybe Pickens is probably the best option at receiver this year because that's all he does is make big plays. It still doesn't make me fall in love with him. Deontay Johnson, he was. Well,
we'll get to the receivers in a second. Let's finish up with Najee and Warren. Here's the only thing, and I agree with you on Warren. I like Warren, and stock's going up in Warren because at a training camp, they're saying they're utilizing a lot of 2-back sets, which they did a little bit last year, which puts a little more faith in Warren. I think he's the more explosive of the two guys, like you said, in terms of big plays. Najee Harris didn't have it last year. That just wasn't his game. So when I look,
even dating back to college,
I do take back what I said earlier. Last year, there was an inverse. His yards before carries was higher than the year prior, and his yards after contact. Sorry, yards before contact, yards after contact were lower. They were under 2. So he didn't break as many tackles as he did his rookie season. And so again, like, he just doesn't have the explosiveness. And I mean, he's a good receiver out the backfield. They just didn't utilize him. And now you add another pass catcher with Allen Robinson and good tight end. I mean, I don't see him getting more out of there. I see Jaylen Warren, taking into his usage a little bit too as well. So he's somebody that when you look at the ADP, he's 27th overall. He's RB12, so he's a top 12 option. But when you look at that 27th overall, you have receivers at the 31st and 29th and 30th, like Olave, Higgins, Devonta Smith. Like, is that where you want to? Do you want to go with Najee Harris at the end of the beginning of the third round, or do you want to go with one of those guys? Because other than that, you're looking at ETN, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson are going right before Najee,
as they should. But unless you obviously Dalvin goes to the Jets, then I'm dropping Breece Hall heavily. But to me, I think he's in that position where the running backs are, that he may be the last one there that you can guarantee volume, but it's a volume guy with low output. I'd rather go with a wide receiver with high upside and usage, and then try and take another guy later on, like Dameon Pierce, like we talked about, or Joe Mixon or Aaron Jones, some guy who's got who could finish the same total points as he did last year, or as he does at the end of the season, just different way to do it, and has chance to have bigger games than Najee. So yeah, I mean, you look at the final 8 games of the season. So I know, we don't want to split up and just take a sample size, but you look at the final 8 games of the season when Pickett really started to come into his own, and Najee actually had a productive year. So I still think he's a top 12 running back, and I really do. I really do think he deserves to be there just based on the volume. But if you look at the numbers last year, I'm just going to run down his ranks, okay, and where he finished week by week. So starting with week 10, RB20, then RB4, RB29, 23, 16, 14, 24, 6, 10. In 4 of those games, he had under 10 points, but he never had under 9 points. So he was right around that 10-point mark, and he finished the season off, I mean, not stupid strong where he was blowing up like Cam Akers was in the last couple of games, but he's finished the season.
Yeah, he had solid numbers.
So if you're drafting him as an RB2, love it. I really do. Like, he's going to get the volume. Having him as an RB2, a guy that can be consistent with some upside because of touchdown potential. I mean, the first half of the season, he only had 1 touchdown, and then he finishes the season. Sorry, he had 3 touchdowns, 2 of them receiving, so only 1 rushing. But then he had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns to finish the season. To finish the season off. So he finished the season off strong. And yeah, his efficiency is the biggest concern. Is he's going to get volume, but his efficiency is down. And that's okay, because like this offense is going to be decent enough where, like, yeah, they might have the big, like, again, they have big play guys like Pickens and Deontay that can get the big chunk play, and they get stopped at the 5-yard line. And who do you think they're going to? You think they're going to throw the ball? No, they're going to just give it to Najee, and he's going to punch it in. So,
well, then RB2, Kenny Pickett did have 3 touchdowns there. I mean, I like him as an RB2 as well. You just got to make that decision on how you build it out. If you're leaning on him as your RB1, he's like one of those last guys that's going to get the volume that could give you potential RB1 numbers, but his yards per carry are going to have to go up for him to truly do that. But again, like if you go wide receiver first round, you're coming around end of the second round and he's sitting there, say you went Jefferson or Chase, and then you're coming around, he's a good guy to take because of the volume. He's going to give you RB1 volume numbers, And if he can get his yards per carry up, he's going to give you RB1 output as well. Let's move on to the pass catchers here. Deontay Johnson, we mentioned it, had a downturn of a year with 0 touchdowns.
One more thing on Najee. He only had 100-yard game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's all because his yards per carry are so low. He needs the volume to get the numbers he is. Yeah. So, again, that yards per carry gets up into the 4 range. You're going to see some better yardage output on a per-game basis. So, again, let's go to Deontay Johnson. He's 78 overall, wide receiver 33. He did not finish in the top 40 last year. He finished at 46, 30 in PPR just because of the volume there. Again, we're talking standard scoring here. He had 147 targets, which was the second highest in his 4-year span in the NFL. 86 receptions for 882, and like I said, 0 touchdowns. So here's the number that jumps out to me on him is he had a 58% catch percentage last year, which is, to me, that is a low number for him across his career. Before that, he was above 61 every single season. So yeah, that in part was due to his quarterback play, in my opinion. It wasn't all due to him. So I think with another year under the belt with Kenny Pickett, I expect Deontay to still be the wide receiver 1 here. Even if he's 1A and you want to say Pickens will be 1B, I still see him 1 based on the volume and opportunity. But to me, I like the upside of George Pickens with the fact that he finished wide receiver 31 last year. He finished 39 PPR, but 31 because he ended up having 4 touchdowns. He had 800 yards, only 80 shy of Deontay Johnson, but he did it on 34 less receptions. When you have a 15.4 yards per catch average, that's big playability for George Pickens, and I think he flashed that middle to late season. I'm going to expect a little bit more of that. Again, I don't know if anybody coming out of this receiving core is going to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL in terms of fantasy, but to have one of these guys as your flex or wide receiver 2 option, depending upon how heavy you go on running back or quarterback and you're needing somebody. Again, Pickens going at wide receiver 35, just two behind Deontay Johnson. I like the value there. And then obviously you have Allen Robinson, who is off the chart in terms of where you can get him in your draft. He's going to be free at that point. And he finished at 86 last year. He did have a good 10.2 yards per reception, which is on par with his career. But the volume wasn't there. He wasn't used as well as they thought they were going to use him, and he just can't stay healthy either. So, which guy do you like most in this receiving core?
It's tough because I like Deontay just based on his volume, and the 0 touchdowns I think is an outlier because if he has three touchdowns, he finishes ahead of Pickens, right? So. I don't know. I like Pickens. Like I said, I like Pickens because he has the big playability. He has the 15 yards per catch. He has monster hands. He's a physical guy. He's kind of, the prototypical like Steelers wide receiver, right? You think of like Hines Ward and how aggressive and physical he was. Well, Pickens is very similar in terms of how he plays the game, but he's a better pass catcher and he makes freak catches. So I like Pickens. But it's hard for me to kind of stay away from Deontay based on the volume and the fact that he doesn't need to get 8 touchdowns because he's going to get 140 targets. I mean, there's a reason even when Pickett came in and started, there's a reason that Deontay had still 140 targets, 134 targets, right? There's a reason because he's the better receiver. He gets open, and they just had poor quarterback play for the majority of the season last year. But I think this is going to be a team that's going to be around 8 or 9 wins. Their defense is going to be the catalyst to keep them in games. They're not going to go and throw up 28 points and 30 points a game. They're just not they're not built that way. And it's hard for me to love any of these receivers as well because just like the Baltimore receivers, even though I think the Steelers receiving core is much more talented than Baltimore's, like across the board. but it's just going to be mediocrity in the passing game. So I can't fall in love with them. But if I were to say who do I like at value and who would I be willing to draft, I think it'd be Pickens.
Okay, and I agree with you. I mean, when I look at the red zone targets last year,
and that's
in terms of that, Deontay Johnson did have 16 red zone targets, which puts him up there on par with like Allen Lazard, Zay Jones, Russell Gage, Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb only had 15 last year. AJ Brown only had 15. So, but his reception percentage was 43 and no touchdowns out of it, where the rest of these guys are getting 4 to 6 touchdowns. So when you look at George Pickens and his numbers, pulling it up here, he only had 7. He only had 2 receptions, but those 2 receptions were both touchdowns. So like his reception to touchdown is 100% there. I like the odds, even though there was less last year. I like Deontay Johnson, but like I said, I think Pickens' big playability gives him the edge up on the 2 of them. And he's young and he's electric. So I think Pickens, in especially games that are going to need to rely on some big plays and some big scoring plays, is going to get the ball from Pickett more often. But again, it could be a 1A, 1B.
My concern with I don't really think it's a 1A, 1B, because if you look at other 1A, 1B situations, the split in the terms of receptions and targets isn't as much. And this is a huge split in terms of receptions and targets.
Well, I'm not talking about last year. I'm talking about going into this year. That may be different. I'm projecting it to be a little bit closer than it was last year.
I don't know. That's where I can't really get there just yet. I still think Pickens is going to be around, 80 targets, hopefully he catches more, and he's probably around 60, 65 catches on the season. But what he can do with those catches is much better. And like you said, he's a bigger target. He's big, strong hands. He's kind of that when you think of a good red zone threat, he's that, right? Because he's going to go up there and win the 50-50. He's going to go and beat people in the back of the end zone and on the corner routes. So, yeah, I like Pickens more just on that. Deontay's great, and he's a volume catch play, but he's not a huge even though he's targeted in the red zone a lot. We haven't seen that from him. We didn't see it last year from him. And the biggest question why I don't like these guys is Kenny Pickett. Can he prove to throw more touchdowns and less interceptions and be efficient with the football and be able to lead this offense to getting around that 28 points a game mark? That's really high, but like they need to be scoring 3 touchdowns a game. So if they're around 21 points, like he's going to get, his numbers are going to go up, but they just weren't that last year. Like this offense couldn't score and couldn't move the ball.
All right. Well, let's finish up with the Steelers. We'll chat real quick about Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington, even though there's not much to say about him yet. Pat Freiermuth, ADP 93 overall, tight end number 9. He's in the top 10 tight ends. I have him inside my top 10 tight ends. Just purely because 98 targets last year. I expect him to be somewhere around the same. I don't really care the fact that Allen Robinson's on the team. That's going to change much. 63 catches, 732. He had 11.6 yards per reception. So he's a mismatch for linebackers, which is nice to see. And the low number of 2 touchdowns is what hurts him. So it's a matter of getting more of those red zone targets and finding that there. I like Freiermuth. He's kind of in that big group of tight ends of Dalton Schultz and Goddard and all those guys kind of sitting right there. It's like if you miss on the first 2 guys, you've got maybe 3 more chances to get somebody of high value, and then you get this big group of guys down below and the next one there before it just completely falls off. Joku, kind of all the same there. Quick technical difficulty there. Sorry. We lost stream for a second. That being said, Darnell Washington, I think, is a huge talent coming out of Georgia, as you see in my background here. But I don't see him cracking into Freiermuth too much at all. They may use him in 2 tight end sets, but he's an athletic freak. He's a huge beast. He may be somebody you want to think about stashing late in a dynasty league because who knows what his future is going to hold as a tight end there. They obviously liked him and drafted him. So that's enough to say about the Steelers. There's nothing new about Freiermuth. Nothing big that's going to pop off the page. So let's move on to the Cincinnati.